I never thought I'd be one of those guys, the ones who sit in their car, staring blankly at the house they built with their wife, wondering if everything they knew was a lie. My name is David Carter, and up until a month ago, I thought I had a pretty damn good life. I'm 38 years old, married to Emily, 36, for the last 12 years. We have a 6-year-old daughter, Lily, who's the light of my life. We live in a nice, quiet neighborhood just outside of Denver, in a house we bought right before Lily was born. A cozy 2-story place with a backyard where we'd have cookouts in the summer and snowball fights in the winter. It wasn't a mansion, but it was home. I work in cybersecurity, mostly from home, and Emily is an event planner, which means she's out of the house a lot, meeting with vendors, setting up venues, managing last-minute crises. She loves her job. She's damn good at it too. If you had asked me a month ago how my marriage was going, I'd have said, great. Sure, maybe we had fallen into a routine, maybe we didn't have wild, passionate sex every night like we did in our 20s, but who does? Marriage isn't a Hollywood movie. It's about stability, trust, partnership. That's what we had. At least, that's what I thought. But lately, something had been off. The first signs. It started with small things. Emily's texts became more frequent, but when I asked her about it, she'd just say it was work-related. No big deal, right? Except she used to complain that work texts after 8 p.m. were annoying. Now she was glued to her phone at night, tapping away, smiling at something she wasn't sharing with me. Then there were the work drinks. She started going out more often, always claiming it was a team thing, networking, or meeting with clients. And she looked different on those nights, like she put in extra effort. New perfume. That black dress I hadn't seen in a while. High heels instead of flats. One night, as she was heading out, Lily ran up to her and hugged her legs. "Mommy, can you read me a story before bed?" Emily hesitated, looking at her phone. "Not tonight, sweetie. Mommy has a work thing. But Daddy will read to you, okay?" She kissed Lily's forehead and then was gone. And then there was the password change. We had a shared Netflix account, and one night, when I tried to log in, I was locked out. Incorrect password. Weird. I asked Emily about it, and she casually said she must have changed it when she updated some settings. I didn't think much of it until a week later when our bank app also required me to reset my password. And then my phone bill. It wasn't a big deal, but something about it felt deliberate. The missed calls and the lies. A few weeks ago, I started noticing missed calls on our landline. We don't use it much, it's mostly for spam calls and emergencies, but I still check the caller ID. 3 times in 1 week, there was an unknown number. One night, as Emily was in the shower, I picked up the phone when it rang. Hello? A moment of silence. Then a click. That's when I started to feel it in my gut, that feeling that something wasn't right. I began paying closer attention. Emily had a habit of leaving her phone face down on the counter now. She would take longer showers than usual. Her phone never buzzed when she was in the room, but when she'd go to grab a snack from the kitchen, I'd hear the faint vibration from across the house. The dinner that changed everything. Last Saturday, we had a family dinner planned at my brother's house. Emily had agreed to go a week earlier, but on the day of, she suddenly wasn't feeling well. "I think I have a migraine," she said, rubbing her temples. "You go ahead with Lily. I just need to sleep it off." That was fine, except, when I left with Lily, I saw Emily through the rearview mirror. As soon as our car rounded the corner, she stepped outside on the phone, talking to someone, pacing in the front yard. I felt my hands tighten around the steering wheel. That night, I couldn't sleep. Emily had never been a liar. But something was wrong. The next day, I decided to check our phone bill. Since we were on a shared plan, I could see her calls. And there it was. The same unknown number. Called 5 times that week. All late at night. All lasting more than 20 minutes. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Who the hell was she talking to at 11:45 p.m. when I was asleep upstairs? The doubt turns into a plan. For days, I wrestled with my thoughts. Maybe it was just work. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. I knew. I started keeping track of everything. The nights out. The calls. The way she smiled at her phone but barely looked at me anymore. Then, last night, I made a decision. I was going to follow her. Not because I was some jealous husband, but because I needed the truth. Emily had a work event scheduled for Thursday night. I told her I had a late Zoom meeting and wouldn't be able to wait up. But instead of sitting at home, I was going to get in my car, drive downtown, and see exactly where she was going. No more doubts. No more assumptions. Just the cold, hard truth. And if she was lying? I needed to be ready for what came next. Because nothing would ever be the same again. The night of Emily's so-called work event came faster than I expected. She spent extra time getting ready, standing in front of the mirror, fussing over her hair and makeup. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her apply lipstick, the deep red shade she usually saved for date nights. "You look nice," I said casually. Emily glanced at me in the mirror and smiled, but it was a different kind of smile. One that didn't quite reach her eyes. Forced. "Thanks, babe. It's just a work thing. Gotta look professional." She spritzed perfume on her wrists, the expensive one I bought her for our anniversary. I said nothing. I just nodded, took a sip of my beer, and walked out of the room. I already knew what was coming. And tonight, I was going to confirm it. Following her. At exactly 7:30 p.m., Emily kissed Lily goodnight, grabbed her purse, and left the house. I waited exactly 5 minutes before heading out myself. I had thought about putting a tracker on her car, but something about that felt too invasive. Instead, I decided to follow the old-fashioned way, at a distance. She drove downtown, which wasn't weird in itself. But when she pulled into a hotel parking lot instead of the usual restaurants where she met her coworkers, my stomach turned. She got out of the car, smoothing down her dress, a dress I had never seen before. A man was waiting for her near the entrance. Tall. Well-dressed. Confident. They didn't shake hands. They didn't exchange pleasantries like colleagues meeting up for a meeting. He kissed her on the cheek. And she let him. I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. There it was. The confirmation I had been dreading. I pulled into a dark corner of the parking lot, heart hammering. My hands clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I watched as they walked inside together. I sat there for a full 10 minutes, hoping and praying that maybe I was misinterpreting things. That maybe she'd come back out, alone, checking her phone, waiting for an actual work meeting to start. But she didn't. I had my answer. The evidence. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car, staring at the hotel entrance, my mind racing. My first instinct was to storm inside and confront her on the spot. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized she had been caught. I wanted to see him, whoever the hell he was, and make sure he knew he had just stepped into another man's home. But then I stopped myself. A confrontation wouldn't help me. If anything, it would just give Emily the upper hand. She'd deny, make excuses, twist the story, cry, and suddenly, I'd be the bad guy for invading her privacy. No. I needed to be smart. So I pulled out my phone and started recording. I took pictures of her car. The hotel entrance. The timestamp on my phone screen. I opened the hotel's website and booked a room on the same floor. If I was going to burn my marriage to the ground, I was going to do it with cold, undeniable proof. What I saw. Walking through the lobby, I felt like my body was moving on autopilot. I didn't even hear the receptionist when she handed me my key card. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, my stomach churning. I didn't know what I expected to find, but the moment I stepped out into the hallway, I saw them. Emily and the man were standing outside room 412. They weren't just talking. His hands were on her waist. Hers were on his chest. They were kissing. Not a friendly peck. A deep, slow kiss. My vision blurred with rage. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I forced myself to step back into the shadows, my pulse hammering. I lifted my phone, my hands shaking, and took the final piece of evidence. A photo. A video. Undeniable proof. Then, without a word, I turned around and left. The drive home. I don't remember driving home. 1 minute I was in the hotel, my world crumbling around me. The next, I was sitting in my driveway, staring at the house we had built together, wondering how the hell I had been so blind. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, empty. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to my face? Had she ever felt guilty? Had she ever loved me at all? The aftermath. I didn't confront her that night. When Emily came home around 11:45 p.m., she slipped into bed next to me, like nothing had happened. She smelled like hotel soap and another man's cologne. I stared at the ceiling, my fists clenched under the covers. I wanted to ask her if she had fun. I wanted to ask her if it was worth it. But instead, I said nothing. Not yet. She had no idea that her world was about to come crashing down. And when it did, I wanted her to feel every ounce of pain she had just put me through. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through 1,000 different scenarios of how this would go down. Emily slept beside me, her breathing soft and steady, completely unaware that I knew. That I had seen everything. That I had evidence. I could have woken her up right then, shoved my phone in her face, and demanded an explanation. But that would have been too easy for her. Too predictable. She would have cried, gaslit me, twisted the story, maybe even denied it all. No. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. Setting the stage. The next morning, Emily woke up before me and went about her normal routine. She kissed me on the forehead before she left for work. I almost laughed. I watched from the window as she drove away, her betrayal sitting in the driver's seat like a ghost. I had a plan now. I wasn't going to explode like some angry, heartbroken fool. I was going to break her. She wasn't going to expect this. So I spent the day preparing. First, I sent our daughter, Lily, to my mother's house for the weekend. My mom was thrilled to have her over, and I didn't give Emily a chance to argue. I told her it was a father-daughter weekend with Grandma. Then, I gathered everything. The phone records. The hotel booking confirmations. The photos and videos. Every lie she had told me over the last few months, sitting neatly in a folder on my laptop. By the time she got home that evening, I was calm. Controlled. And ready to destroy her. Dinner for two. Emily walked in, dropped her purse on the counter, and stretched. Hey, babe. How was your day? I smiled. Good. Thought we'd have a special dinner tonight. Just the two of us. She looked pleased. Guilty, even. As if she was grateful that I was making an effort, completely oblivious to the fact that this wasn't an act of love. This was a trap. I made her favorite meal. Steak, roasted potatoes, asparagus. I even poured us wine. She ate with no idea that I knew what she had done. Halfway through the meal, I leaned back, swirling the wine in my glass. So, how was work? I asked. She barely looked up from her plate. Same as always. Meetings, emails, the usual stress. Liar. I nodded slowly, sipping my wine. Then I set my glass down and pulled out my phone. Showtime. Dropping the bomb. That's interesting, I said, my voice cool. Because I thought maybe you'd want to talk about this. I turned my phone screen toward her and pressed play. Her face drained of color. The video showed her and the man outside the hotel room. Their kiss. His hands on her body. Emily's fork clattered onto her plate. She stared at the screen, her face frozen in shock. David. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Go ahead. Say it. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. It's not what it looks like. I let out a laugh. A real, full-bodied laugh. Not what it looks like. I repeated, my voice laced with amusement. Emily, I recorded you walking into a hotel with another man. I watched you kiss him. I know you've been lying to me for months. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. Who is he? I demanded. Silence. Her hands trembled as she reached for her wineglass. She took a sip, probably trying to buy herself a few seconds to think of an excuse. I didn't let her. I already know his name. Her head snapped up. I pulled out another piece of evidence, his LinkedIn profile. James Carter. One of her clients. A married man. Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to protest but knew there was no point. I leaned back, arms crossed. So? How long? She wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. David, How? Long? I repeated. Her lips trembled. She finally whispered the words. 3 months. A slow nod from me. 3 months of lies. 3 months of gaslighting. 3 months of humiliating me. Her excuses begin. It didn't mean anything, she rushed to say. I swear, it wasn't serious. I let out a cold chuckle. So, what? You just ruin our marriage for fun? She winced. I was lonely, she admitted. You've been so distant. It felt like we weren't even husband and wife anymore. I slammed my fist on the table, making her jump. Don't you dare blame this on me. Her breath hitched. I've been here, Emily. Every single day. I take care of our daughter. I support you. I've never given you a reason to doubt me. I stood up. And this is how you repay me? Tears ran down her face. I didn't mean to hurt you. I shook my head. You just didn't mean to get caught. The turning point. Emily wiped her eyes, breathing heavily. Then she did the one thing I wasn't expecting. She dropped the act. The regret, the guilt, the shame, it vanished. She sat back, crossing her arms. What do you want me to say, David? That I'm a terrible person? Fine. I am. I stared at her, stunned. I shouldn't have done it, okay? But what do you expect me to do now? Crawl on my knees and beg? I tilted my head, studying her. There she was. The real Emily. I nodded slowly. Good, I said. Now we're finally being honest. Her expression faltered. What does that mean? She asked. I pulled one last document from my folder and placed it on the table. Divorce papers. She froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. David, no. We're done. She shook her head rapidly. No. We can fix this. I stood up. No, Emily. You broke this. Her breath came out shaky. What about Lily? I picked up my phone and hit play. A voice recording. Emily's own voice, recorded from our landline. Her conversations with James. The moaning. The I miss you texts. Her face drained of color. I'll be filing for full custody. She opened her mouth to beg, to protest, to scream, but I was already walking away. This was over. And this time, she had no one to blame but herself. I left Emily sitting at the dining table, her face frozen in shock as she stared at the divorce papers. I had thought about this moment for days, playing it over and over in my head. Would she cry? Beg? Scream? Try to turn things around on me? But she did none of those things. She just sat there. Motionless, I walked upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom. I wasn't ready to deal with her reaction. I needed a minute, just one damn minute, to collect myself. I took a deep breath, running my hands through my hair, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face was hollow. My eyes had dark circles under them from nights of no sleep. This wasn't me. I was always the stable one. The man who had it together. The father who tucked his daughter in at night and kissed her forehead, knowing his world was in place. But my world was gone now. Emily had destroyed it. And the worst part? She didn't even look sorry. A broken marriage and a broken house. I expected her to follow me upstairs. To bang on the door. To plead for another chance. Instead, silence. I stayed in the bedroom for almost an hour, expecting her to come after me. But nothing. When I finally opened the door, I found her still sitting at the dining table, staring at nothing. The divorce papers were still untouched. It was unnerving, seeing her like that. Like a statue. I cleared my throat. I need you to sign them. Emily blinked slowly, as if waking up from a trance. Then she looked at me, her eyes dull, lifeless. David, she whispered. Do you really hate me that much? Hate? I didn't even know what I felt anymore. Anger? Disgust? Resentment? Grief? Maybe all of them at once. I don't hate you, I said honestly. I just don't love you anymore. I saw it in her face, the sharp intake of breath, the way her eyes widened, the way her hands clutched the table. That broke her more than the divorce papers did. She had expected a fight. She had expected me to scream. She had expected me to care. But I didn't. Not anymore. A last-ditch attempt. The next day, Emily started acting differently. For the past few weeks, she had been distant. Coming home late, spending more time on her phone, barely looking at me. But today? She suddenly wanted to be a wife again. She woke up early and made breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast, the whole deal. I figured we could sit down and talk, she said, setting a plate in front of me. I stared at the food, then back at her. Talk about what? She hesitated. Everything. I want to explain. Explain? There was nothing to explain. I already knew everything. I already saw everything. I already felt everything. But I let her talk anyway. She took a deep breath. I never meant to hurt you, David. I snorted. You never meant to get caught. Her face twisted. It wasn't like that. It wasn't serious. I slammed my fork down. You keep saying that, Emily. But you spent 3 months sneaking around, lying to my face. You kissed him in a hotel hallway like I didn't exist. She flinched. Was it worth it? I asked, my voice quiet now. She swallowed hard. No. For the first time, her voice cracked. No, David, it wasn't worth it. She rubbed her hands over her face, shaking her head. I was stupid. Her voice broke again. I don't even know why I did it. Liar. She knew exactly why she did it. And so did I. Because she wanted to. That was the truth she would never say out loud. A choice, revenge or resolution. I had spent the last week planning my revenge. I had the photos. The messages. The hotel receipts. I could ruin her. I could send everything to her family. To her boss. I could make sure James Carter's wife saw the evidence. I could blow up their lives the way she had blown up mine. And for days, I thought about doing it. But now, sitting across from her, watching her finally break down, I realized something. She wasn't worth it. She wasn't worth my energy. She wasn't worth my hate. She wasn't even worth my revenge. I stood up from the table. Sign the papers, Emily. Her lip trembled. "David, please. I won't ruin you," I said. "But I'll never forgive you either." Her shoulders sagged. Her face crumbled. She knew then. It was really over. Leaving it all behind. 2 weeks later, the papers were signed. The house was put up for sale. I packed my things, moving into an apartment closer to my office. Emily begged to keep the house, but I didn't care about the money. I just wanted to leave. She cried when I left. She whispered "I'm sorry" over and over again as I walked out the door. But I never looked back. Not once. Final decision. Months passed. Lily and I built a new routine. I had full custody. Emily got weekends. She tried to be better. More present. More involved. But I could see the guilt still ate her alive. And honestly, I didn't care anymore. I was free. And she had to live with what she did. That was punishment enough. It had been exactly 6 months since I walked out of that house for the last time. 6 months since I left behind a life I thought was built on trust. 6 months since I handed Emily the divorce papers and watched her world collapse the way she had shattered mine. Now, I was free. And yet, there was still one final thread left to cut. Emily had asked to meet. One last time. She claimed she just wanted to talk. I almost didn't go. Almost. But some part of me, the part that needed absolute closure, agreed. I had to hear her out. I had to end this. So that's how I found myself sitting across from her in a quiet cafe on a rainy Sunday afternoon, watching the woman I once loved stir her coffee with a trembling hand. She looked different. Not physically, Emily was still beautiful in that effortless way she always had been. But there was something in her eyes now. Something I hadn't seen before. Regret. Or at least, the realization that regret had come too late. "You look good, David." Her voice was soft, careful. "Healthier." I nodded. "I am." A flicker of pain crossed her face at my answer, but she quickly masked it behind a small, weak smile. She was nervous. Good. I let the silence stretch, waiting for her to speak first. Emily sighed, setting her spoon down. "I know you didn't have to come," she said. "So, thank you for that." I didn't respond. Because I wasn't here for pleasantries. I was here for answers. I was here to bury this once and for all. "Why did you want to meet, Emily?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. She exhaled slowly, biting her lower lip like she was choosing her words carefully. I guess. I just wanted to say sorry." A humorless laugh escaped me. "You already did." Her eyes flickered up to meet mine. "Not like this." I stayed silent, waiting. She swallowed hard. "I know you'll never forgive me. And I don't expect you to. But I need you to understand something." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "All right. Go ahead." Emily hesitated, then looked down at her hands. "I never stopped loving you, David." I stiffened. The audacity of that statement made my jaw clench. She cheated on me. She lied to my face for months. And she had the nerve to sit here and tell me she still loved me? I shook my head, letting out a slow breath. "No, Emily. You don't get to say that." She flinched. "But it's true." "No, it's not." My voice was firm, steady. "Because you don't do what you did to someone you love." Her eyes glossed over, but I wasn't falling for it. "Not anymore." "I was stupid," she whispered. "I was selfish. And I can never take it back. But it wasn't because I didn't love you." I scoffed. "Then what was it, Emily?" "Huh?" I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp. "What excuse do you have for betraying the one person who gave you everything?" She swallowed. "I don't have one." Good. At least she wasn't trying to justify it anymore. At least she finally owned up to it. Emily reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. She slid it across the table toward me. "This is for you." I eyed it warily. "What is it?" Her lips pressed together. "Just read it. Later." I didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, I really watched her. The woman I had spent 12 years building a life with. The mother of my child. The person I had once believed would grow old with me. And now she was just someone I used to know. She wiped at her cheek, blinking rapidly. "I think about it every day, you know." "Good," I said coldly. "You should." She nodded, like she agreed. Like she accepted it. And maybe, for the first time, she really did. A final goodbye. When I walked out of that cafe, I didn't look back. I didn't wait for her to cry. I didn't stay to comfort her. She had made her choices. And now she had to live with them. I got into my car and tossed the envelope onto the passenger seat, staring at it for a long moment before finally tearing it open. Inside was a handwritten letter. A letter that simply said, "I will regret this for the rest of my life. I hope one day, you'll be happy again." I exhaled sharply. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt lighter. Not because I forgave her. Not because I understood her. But because I no longer cared. She was a closed chapter. And I was ready for my next story. It's strange how time moves after betrayal. Some days, it feels like the pain will never stop, that no matter what you do, the weight of it sits on your chest, making it harder to breathe. Other days, it feels like the past never even happened. Like it was all just a bad dream you finally woke up from. For me, it was both. 6 months after my last conversation with Emily, I was still figuring out which version of reality was real. Had I really left behind the woman I once thought I would grow old with? Had I really rebuilt my life from the ground up? Or was I just going through the motions, waiting for the past to catch up with me? A life without her. Lily was my entire world now. She had adjusted to the new routine surprisingly well, though I knew she sensed the changes. She never asked too many questions, but she did ask the hard ones. "Why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore? Did I do something wrong?" The first time she asked that, I nearly broke down. I had to pull over on the side of the road because my hands were shaking. I took a deep breath and turned to her, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong." Her big blue eyes blinked up at me. "Then why?" I couldn't tell her the truth. She was only 6. She didn't need to carry that burden. So I did what any father would do. I lied. Mommy and Daddy just grew apart. I hated saying it. Because that wasn't the truth. But sometimes, the truth isn't something a child should ever have to hear. Emily's new life. I hadn't seen Emily in weeks. She had weekend visitation rights, but more often than not, she found a reason to cancel. At first, I thought she was just giving me space. But then I found out the truth. James Carter's wife had left him. Emily had gotten exactly what she wanted. She and James were finally free to be together. Except they weren't. Because James had moved away. Apparently, he wasn't interested in playing house with my ex-wife. He had gotten his fun. And now, he was gone. Emily had thrown away her marriage, her family, and her dignity for a man who never really wanted her. The irony was so thick it was almost poetic. Running into her. I was grocery shopping when I saw her again. She was standing in the produce section, staring blankly at a pile of apples like she had forgotten why she was even there. She looked tired. Worn down. She had lost weight, her clothes slightly loose on her frame. For the first time in months, I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not resentment. Not even sympathy. Just nothing. I walked past her without a second glance. And for the first time since this all began, I knew I was free. The night everything changed. One evening, about a year after the divorce, I sat alone on my couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. I had gotten used to the quiet. No more arguments. No more tension. No more lies. Then, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something made me open it. Emily. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time. She hadn't reached out in months. What could she possibly have left to say? I typed a response. No. Then, after a second thought, I added one more thing. I've moved on, Emily. You should too. And just like that, it was finally over. For good. A new beginning. I don't know if betrayal ever really leaves you. Maybe it lingers in the background, like a shadow that flickers in the corner of your vision. Maybe some part of you never truly heals. But I do know this. Life goes on. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready for it.